My name is Don Tipping, and I'm an organic farmer here in Williams, Oregon. I've lived here for the past 15 years. The name of my farm is Seven Seeds Farm. We're up on the north slope of Sugarloaf Grayback Mountain on the east fork of the Williams Valley. We grow certified organic vegetables, fruits, seeds. We raise sheep, ducks, chickens, turkeys, and geese. And we sell our produce through local farmers markets and also cooperative CSA that we deliver food to about 150 families in the Williams Valley and the Applegate and Rogue Valleys, which will be expanding delivery of that to Klamath Falls, Central Point, Brookings, Wairika, and Mount Shasta this next season. We also have our own seed company called Siskiyou Seeds that we sell seed locally through seed racks, nationally and actually internationally through website and seed catalog. And then we're also now becoming the order fulfillment center for a grower-owned cooperative seed venture called the Family Farmer Seed Co-op, which I helped start, and we're housing in our farm. So that's 12 farmers from Nebraska, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, New Mexico, and California that grow organic seed, send it to us, and then we redistribute that out. And these are all open-pollinated, non-GMO, certified organic varieties, many of which were bred by the farmers who are growing the seed. And that's the work that I do myself, too, is variety development and plant breeding. Where we farm in Williams is a unique spot where it's where the valley transitions from bottomland up into mountains. So we're sort of on the gentle slope as it goes up the mountain. And this gives us the unique situation of that we're surrounded by largely intact forest lands. We have Bureau of Land Management, BLM land on 3 sides of our farm. So we have a stream that we use for irrigation water that we have water rights for, that we're able to actually use gravity to do the irrigation, and that stream originates on public land, forested land. We also farm some leased ground in other parts of the valley that also use water from different streams, so we depend on actually 3 distinct watersheds for our irrigation, all of which use surface water that we're irrigating with. So for us, there's a direct connection between our farmland and the seeds and produce that we grow and the water quality that comes into it. And we're actually required by certified organic rules, which is actually overseen by the USDA. The quality of the water that is originating in forest lands and then flowing through our farm, and then we use that water. So morally, that's gotten me involved in forest land issues. For one, because I care about the way the forest is taken care of in our area, but also it affects our livelihood, our economic, functioning as a certified organic farm to have high quality water. So over the years, as different timber sales have come up, it's been a good way to not just say, hey, we don't like what you're doing. We don't want to look at a clear cut. It's more along the lines of an argument of, well, what you're doing actually directly affects not only my health and my family's health. I have 2 children, 2 boys that are 5 and 9, and are born and raised on the farm. But it affects our ability to just do business, to maintain a sustainable livelihood there. Which I feel, oftentimes in a legal setting, that those type of arguments are heard more, even though I believe the moral arguments should have just as much weight. Somehow, if it's affecting your bottom line, you have more say in the way the legal discourse works. So, particularly I'm concerned about private forest lands, of which all these streams, the 3 streams that I'm thinking of that flow through the 3 different farms that we manage, go through both public and private forest land. And on private forest land, there's no regulations regarding using herbicides. And that's fairly standard practice, is to come in, cut all the trees, and then use herbicides to control the regrowth of the hardwoods, oaks, the madrones, manzanita, to basically turn it into a tree farm of conifers. So what we've seen is typically aerial herbicide spraying following a clear cut and then they go back in by hand and actually inject the hardwoods with herbicides to stop the regrowth. That's pretty much how private forest land is managed throughout the Pacific Northwest. And just on the West Fork of Williams up Caves Camp, we've watched that happen on 120 acres, and it continues to be a source of erosion. Herbicide drift through the air, through spraying, and also, of course, through the water. All these things are mobile and oftentimes are uptaked, through plants and also animals that are moving throughout the ecosystem. So, that's something that is of a lot of concern for me. So the use of herbicides in the headwater regions of these streams, these small tributaries, is of particular concern because herbicides bioaccumulate up the food chain and often remain persistent in the environment for a long time. And as a case in point, atrazine, which is the most common herbicide used in lawn chemicals for people's lawns globally, it bioaccumulates in snow. So actually they found in Eskimos and extreme northern dwelling people, Inuit and Cree and people that live way up there near the Arctic circles have much higher levels of atrazine in their fat cells, even though they don't live in an environment where anybody has any lawns. So we really, Pandora's box is open. We don't quite understand how these things function in the ecosystem. So places like Williams represent really important places to preserve the integrity of organic agriculture, not just on some ideological principle, but we literally are a veritable Noah's Ark of unadulterated genetic material, if you will. And as we understand more and more the way these herbicides get in and they begin to interrupt cellular function on the DNA level, then you lose the integrity of these populations that we're working with that oftentimes are heirloom, not just like from your great grandpa, but going way back to hundreds of years to Central America, Mesoamerica, India, and Eurasia, different areas where these plants have been domesticated, and now we're holding this germplasm. That a really unique thing, that so there's the one on the one side we have this whole science level, and then there's here we are just trying to raise our family, doing a good thing, living in the woods, and raising kids on the land and having a connection to the forest. And then I was visited 2 weeks ago by my friend Dr. Robert Bugg, who's a professor of entomology at UC Davis. He's also a herpetologist. He's an expert about amphibians. And he's putting together this project globally looking at mountain agriculture as really being the refugia that will enable agriculture to really persist through the maelstrom of GMO industrial agriculture. Because we've taken all the best bottomlands and we've put it all in genetically engineered, high chemical input, high fertilizer, a certain system of farming that is dependent on cheap fossil fuels. But if we look at mountain agriculture around the planet, so we can look at areas like Williams, different little valleys in the Cascades are similar. Dr. Bugg is also looking at areas in the Andes and also the Himalayas and trying to create connections and looking at, wow, these areas will represent where we go back to when we realize we've blown it down there. We'll go back there to get the clean genetics, the good, so like right now I maintain about 300 varieties of vegetables, flowers, and herbs that I grow seed of and basically maintain a seed bank. And every year that's expanding and we're getting more seeds sent to us as the people that know how to do this type of work are, go away. So concurrent with that, we're raising kids all within an environment where they're seeing that whole cycle happen, from going up and putting the intake in the creek for the irrigation water, to making the compost out of the animal manures from the sheep and the poultry, to cover cropping and all the things that we do to maintain soil and water quality, to understanding of the genetics and looking at the populations and, that one's no good, and understanding climate change, and that we really represent, like this Noah's Ark that will help us evolve through a changing climate and also changing in conditions of having to deal with the chemicals that get into the air that we have no control. We can't, create an air buffer, if you will. So the way that our headwater regions are taken care of is of paramount concern, and that we really need certain kind of, like the World Wildlife Fund was looking at biosphere preserves. And that's what Dr. Bob Bugg, and I'm a collaborator in this project, along with people in Bolivia, Ecuador, Peru, Nepal, India, and Bhutan, and Washington and Oregon, interestingly enough. to look at, okay, well, how can we do this? How can we establish an awareness it's not just a not in my backyard type issue. It's a much larger scope, and that's why we chose to situate the seed processing and seed storage hub for this national cooperative in Williams, because it represents a really safe area. My friends in North Dakota, they're growing organic seed in a sea of GMO corn and soy. Third generation family farm, and they have to do all this crazy timed isolation so their corn is flowering at a different time than GMO corn so they can preserve the genetic integrity. Whereas in Williams, we have it pretty easy right now, but as we have these threats of a timber sale that really they're just going to be making a fairly small profit on their investment. It's basically just flipping it to make a little bit of money. And meanwhile, we could be threatening the integrity of agriculture, and the medicinal herb trade locally is something that is of particular concern about the relationship to herbicides in the water, soil erosion, and also we can't even quite extrapolate what removing large tracts of forest in the headwater will do to the productivity of streams in terms of being able to have reliable water supply. Right now we can rely on the water from the stream to be used for irrigation, and we fill ponds so that we have water late into the season. But that may change, and I know the herb farm is a large medicinal herb farm locally that farms about 40 acres of medicinal herbs and markets them nationally. They're directly downstream from this one tract that's on the ridge here that is slated to be clear cut. So there's many fronts, and it's difficult to articulate how important this is. Like I said, it's not just the not in my backyard thing. It's like, well, we're actually kind of stewarding a resource that's for the future. That we have a current yield. We're selling seeds, we're selling produce, we're selling medicinal herbs, this type of thing. But then we're also carrying forth a system of farming that's contingent upon the integrity of the whole system of the ecosystem. And that's what enables this farm down here to function, is that up here in the headwater regions, it's thriving and functioning. So those trees are acting as filters for particulate, pollution in the air that's coming from who knows where. And likewise for water that's coming through the rain, it's helping make that clean. Once again, that's kind of proven that it's a huge biofilter. I think that we need to move towards this idea of, these kind of, eco-ag preserves, if you will. And, the Williams and the Applegate people are congregating here. Farmers are moving here because they don't have to worry about pesticide drift, GMO seeds falling off a truck onto their land, these types of issues that are real concerns out there that are shutting down organic farms, basically, and inviting lawsuits and all this. So, right now the legal system doesn't give us a lot of tools about our relationship to forest practices. The GMO issue, we are finding some headway. I've been both a plaintiff and an expert witness in a few lawsuits suing both the USDA and Monsanto over GMO crops. And we're seeing some pretty major successes of being able to shut down GMO crops because it's threatening our ability to do business and adhere to a law, the certified organic law that the USDA has. So here's the USDA, saying you can do this one thing, you can have GMOs, and then also you got to do it organic, and then there's this nexus where they're hitting. And likewise, we're in Oregon. I think we need to articulate it possibly on the state level to get the Oregon State Forest Practices Act changed to hopefully disallow the use of herbicides, particularly aerial herbicide spraying, because they have so little control over the way that functions. And there are botanical herbicides that you can use. Clove oil, for instance, at high concentrations will kill plants. So if they really do need to manage forest lands in a certain way, there are many other tools at the disposal. It doesn't just need to be like, stop doing what you're doing. Let's alter it so that it's cohesive with a general management strategy. And that's where I think we need to begin looking at look at the whole watershed and say, okay, well, these types of regions, this type of activity can take place, whereas here you can do this type of activity, not to be draconian, but just to look at the whole system and see how, oh, if you push here, it's affecting this. So here you can only push so hard, because over here they need to still be able to do their thing. And that goes all the way down to the animals being able to just do their life, which everything should have an inherent right to live. Yeah, so this particular parcel of land is 320 acres. That's a rectangle that's half a square mile. 640 acres is a complete square mile. This was logged back in the early 50s, kind of right after the advent of the chainsaw. So the style of logging back there was very different. 80% of the clear cutting and road building in Oregon has happened post-1980. So the type of logging that took place back then was basically they just went in and what's called pumpkin hunted, went in for the biggest trees. So what's there is actually really nice. There's still a lot of really healthy functioning forest. There's 8-foot diameter madrones up on this ridge. And it's unique in that it's a ridge that comes down from the Siskiyou Crest. Williams is situated at the northern, off a northern spur of the Siskiyou Crest. So if you get up on this ridge onto this land, this 320, it's straddling where it finally goes from kind of lower elevation, about 2,500 feet elevation, up into the moderate elevation. So it's kind of the loading dock, if you will, for animals that are migrating from the Siskiyou Crest, up 6,000, 7,000 foot elevation, that goes all the way to the Klamath River, all the way towards the coast. It's a major land bridge, if you will, for species of high mobility, be it lynx, wolverine, bears, mountain lions, fishers, and now wolves are moving into our region more and more. Just east of Medford, they've tracked a wolf. So it's these type of regions that will serve as the connectivity for these species. So also being on a ridge, it's the watershed divide between the East Fork and the West Fork of the Williams Creek. There's still a lot of remnant old growth on the land, and because it's at this elevational shift point between kind of moderate and lower elevation, there's a lot of species that are unique. There's a unique orchid that's actually, if it was on BLM land, you wouldn't be able to log certain areas. Cypripedium fasciculatum, it's a clustered lady slipper orchid. And there's another plant, Allotropa vigrata, which is called candy stick plant. That's saprophytic. It's white and red, no green pigmentation. It looks like a candy cane coming out of the earth. And it grows in association with mycorrhizal fungi there. And I've walked this land quite a bit and seen a really high incidence of that particular plant that, again, is on an endangered list for public lands. Private lands, we don't have as many rules because of our adherence to private property rights and such. So basically, of the 320 acres, they want to clear. You can't clear cut 100% anymore. You can only clear cut 90%. So of course, this guy's going to clear cut 90%. So I think he wants to do 280 acres of the 320. So that would leave thin strips of trees along the 3 streams that originate on this land. There's 3 headwater regions that either start on this land or just right below. So where the water is actually pooling up out of the earth and then becomes a small stream and then combines with other streams. So it's a spot where clean water is made out of the earth, if you will. So they would, but according to their plan, protect these areas and create these 3 different huge, 90-acre plus clear-cut tracts up on a ridge. Where it's also on a ridge, you can think when we get thunderstorms in and lightning hits, it's usually hitting the ridge because lightning hits the highest point. So if you log up there and you get a bunch of brushy regrowth, you open it up, it creates a big wildfire risk for people that live right downstream. Logging these headwater regions, it increases the fuel danger because we're at this mid to low elevation spot. I know a number of people who own private property where they live and raise their families and stuff that are within a mile of where this is. So it increases the hazard, also the erosion potential when we do get these big rainstorms and you take away the trees on a ridge and do road building and all the yarding. It's a fairly severe impact to move that much biomass off the landscape. The clear cut we saw over on the West Fork that was owned by Rough and Ready Lumber, they did 120 acres, and it looks enormous. So we're talking here 2.5 times that size. Again, on a north slope that's fairly heavily forested, and has some steeper areas, which is why back when they logged it the first time, they couldn't get into a lot of it. But now our technology that we have available to us now enables us to get it all. Whereas back then, they're like, oh, we can't mess with that part. So they left a lot of really nice spots. So, there's a bear den up there. There's all sorts of really unique features to this area. But I think the main one is just understanding its connectivity to the Kangaroo Wilderness area and the Red Buttes Wilderness, that it really represents the northernmost kind of off-ramp, if you will, for animals of high mobility to move into lower elevation areas. We're sincerely hoping that this land, that we can intervene or develop some sort of agreement to avoid it being clear-cut. And in the interim, a number of us have been working for years on developing what would you do instead? So as a solution-oriented proposal, a number of us have been developing restoration forestry protocol, practices, and ideas. Loma Katsi has been a verbal proponent of this for years. A group of us here have been meeting and collaborating ground-based projects of, okay, well, like I was mentioning earlier, developing a variety of different approaches to interacting with the land. Some areas, by assessment, determine, oh, just leave that alone. That's a stream, that's a spring, that's a headwater region, or that's an important animal. Whereas other actions may be appropriate too in terms of a light touch forestry to enhance, we call it fire restoration forestry, because we've kept fire out of these forests. They're not functioning at their ecological equilibrium, if you will, in terms of how fire works as a disturbance cycle to enhance biodiversity and productivity of these lands. So what we've been discussing is the idea of special forest products, whether it's fungi, basket materials, medicinal herbs, rare plants as like a seed source for rare plants for propagation. So being able to have some sort of interaction and thereby, for one, generating income from these actions, to generating knowledge and an information resource base of how do you interact with headwater regions. And I firmly believe, by interacting with it and using it, we all of a sudden increase its value ecologically and to ourselves, because then all of a sudden we're connected to it. And as a neighbor of mine who's we don't always agree politically, but he once told me, he said, God gave us this earth to use but not abuse. And I think that's a really great a way to look at this type of situation. And then it demonstrates to like the landowner right now, like, hey, we want to buy this and do this whole ecological information resource fire restoration park, if you will, to highlight to other watersheds and communities a way that you can broker a solution with a private landowner to come up with an idea that possibly they may even be able to be involved in. A lot of these loggers, they have all the tools and techniques. Hey, well, let's work together. You're a lot better at moving biomass around than I am. But here we have an ecological understanding from a science basis and a community basis that might be able to develop forest practices that are more in accordance with the way the community is functioning. So that's something I'm really intrigued with, and it ultimately is moving back more into a re-indigenization of our forest lands in terms of having those resources not just for clean air, clean water, which are important, but also, well, this is actually part of our livelihood stream, it's part of our cultural base, it's part of our food and medicine resource base, and we will steward it in a way that preserves that in perpetuity for future generations.